African father in America. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. African father in America. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze.
You are listening to African Father in America podcast by Simon Javanokelo, live from Seattle, Washington, USA.
Greetings everyone, my name is Simon Javanokelo and you're listening to the African Father in America podcast. And today is quite an amazing day, especially because I'm privileged to host my sister Carine Kaneza Nantulya, who is the Africa Advocacy Director for Human Rights Watch. Carine is the Africa Advocacy Director within the Africa Division at Human Rights Watch. And before joining Human Rights Watch, she was spokesperson for the Women and Girls Movement for Peace and Security in Burundi. She is a transitional justice practitioner with over 15 years experience in human rights programming and conflict resolution in Burundi, Uganda, Sierra Leone, and South Africa, among others. My dear sister, I just want you to feel at home, and I want you to just share with us your story, your upbringing in Burundi. Can you just paint a picture of, Carine at, like 10 years?
Carine at 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, first, Carine at 10 years was in China.
Oh, wow! You're a global citizen.
It's an interesting story. So I was in Burundi and left when I was 2.
Wow.
My father was appointed as the ambassador at that time, 1976, as the ambassador of Burundi. And as you can remember, the 70s and the 80s was an important era for African countries, including Burundi. So the East, as it was called at that time, was very important in terms for diplomacy, the political ambience of that time. So my father was sent to first Russia. We spent 4 years. I spent 4 years in Russia and then China. So left Burundi when I was 2. I spent 4 years in Moscow. Left when I was 6 and went to China. So it was an interesting time for a 10-year-old Black girl living in China. I'll never forget the one episode I think I will never forget was and I like to refer to it, was when I was in the street of Beijing and an elderly woman came, grabbed my hand and tried to rough what she thought was dirt. Went back home and I had a discussion with my father, who was a historian by training, and he gave me a very quick, I think, life lesson. He said, "Did she scream at you?" I said, "No." Was she? I said, "No." Did she hurt you? I said, "No." And then he said, Carine, racism. Because that was one of the words that my mom said to him. She was, this woman was racist. This is acceptable. And my father said, when we talk about racism, we need to think of the 4 ways racism is manifested. And he said, what you've encountered today was ignorance. People are ignorant because not people who look like you. This poor woman had probably never met a Black kid before you appeared. And he talked about the second layer of racism, and he said, and then you have those who have met Africans and who mistreat them, and that's what we call naked racism. And then he talked about the third level of racism, what he called sophistication. So you'll find people when you grow up, and they will tell you that they have Black friends, but they will never really want to mix with you. And then he talked about the 4th level, which is assimilation. And obviously for a 10-year-old, I did not understand much from that. from that conversation. It's now that my father passed away in 2005. So it's now that I think about it and I'm like, he was very right. Indeed, that's what we see. That's what we see in our professional lives. That's what we see in our social interactions. I went to different schools. I went to private schools. I went to a public school in Burundi because my father was one of those very nationalistic parents. He was like, okay, you speak French like a Parisian. You speak Chinese. At that time, I could speak Mandarin, Russian, which I had kept. But he was like, what about Kirundi? And I was like, well, I speak Kirundi. He said, but can you write it?
Right.
And when I said no, he was like, of course I know you can't. He quickly put me in a high school in Bujumbura. So yeah.
Wow. From a very young age, you did a lot already. Like you spoke in Chinese, in Mandarin, in Russian. Wow, you're just a global citizen, and I'm just glad that we were able to connect. Now, so 10 years old, that's part of your experience, and let's talk about college. Were you in college in Africa, or were you elsewhere internationally?
I was.
Okay.
So I finished my high school in Bujumbura. So, and I think, I'm not sure if Kenya is like that, but I know that in Uganda, you had, when we were growing up, you had this antagonism between public universities and the rise of private universities. To go to a public university, you were seen as, legitimate.
Right.
There's entrepreneurial universities. That's what my father called them. So I went to the only one at that time, the National University of Bujumbura, of Burundi, but it was located in
Bujumbura.
In Bujumbura. Did law, finished my, it was 4 years. And when I finished, worked a bit, and then did my master's, got a master's degree in South Africa. Thank God I went to South Africa, otherwise we would not be having this interview because I would not be speaking English.
Right.
Because Burundi is French speaking.
Right. Wow.
So yeah.
What are your thoughts about the recent events in Burundi, especially with the passing of the president of Burundi, and how is the country looking like, just from your perspective?
I think if I was to say it in one or two words, things are looking terrible in Burundi. And they're looking terrible because we don't learn from the past, right?
Right.
It's almost as if we move from one cycle to another, political mistake to another. I think it was yesterday I was on a webinar and we were talking about, the theme of the discussion was managing political transitions. So I spoke on Burundi, and one of the first things I said, this question is so difficult for me because I don't know if I can talk about managing political transition or rather talk about managing the tools that allow us to even be in a political transition. And so Burundi, it's the one tool we had, and I'm pretty sure you've heard about it, was this mega peace agreement called the Arusha Peace Agreement, signed in 2000. I think I always talk about the peace agreement because there's before the peace agreement, which was a 12-year-long civil war, and there's after the peace agreement, which is a period of time up until now, where it's a situation of no war, no peace, but not really peace, no stability, no respect for human dignity. So right now, where Burundi is at a crossroads. We have a new president, we have a new administration, a new government. The the late President Nkurunziza left a legacy of brutal repression.
Right.
He did few things right when he had just started. He brought out a lot of. There were a lot of positive. I think there were a lot of expectations from Burundians and foreigners. I would like to say that the peace agreement I just mentioned was negotiated under the auspices of two mighty African leaders, namely the late Mandela, President Mandela of South Africa, and late President Nyerere before Mandela. So a lot of hope, a lot of political will.
Right.
But all that went really was not did not mean a lot with in light of what happened after that. The agreement was dismantled. There was a crisis in 2015 which precipitated 500,000 of refugees outside of the country. The rise of a militia affiliated, of a youth militia affiliated to the party in power. And you and I, when you hear militia, when you hear a youth wing that is being armed and being radicalized, it's always a signal. It's always I think it gives you a I'm trying to find the proper word for that. It gives you an opening into a sinister ambience environment within a given system. So we'll see what happens.
Right. Man, it's amazing how far leaders want to go. Until death is when they decide to do the right thing. Anyhow, one of the things that drew me to have this conversation with you was the article that you wrote that was titled "AU must keep momentum to end structural racism."
Yes.
Just speak to me a little bit about what inspired you to write this, especially in this time when the racism and anti-racism campaigns are very important.
I think that it's a couple of things. The first one is the Black Lives Matter momentum US. As I mentioned, I'm not sure if I've mentioned it before, but I also work very closely with the African Union. And it was just a matter of logic that the African Union was going to react as well.
Right.
Remember that it was primarily founded on principles and values of the right to self-determination, human dignity, the fight against apartheid, the anti-slavery movement. I mean, all those principles were provided the foundation upon which the African Union, and before it was the Organization of the African Unity, how it was founded. So what prompted me was really the fact that the chairperson of the commission, of the African Union Commission, Moussa Faki, issued a statement. He issued a statement on, was it on May 29th, I believe. He issued a statement, and it was a powerful statement in the sense that, one, it was coming from the only continental institution that we have that represent the 55 countries on the continent.
Right.
That was
right.
And the other one was what he said in the statement. He referred to the 1964 conference, which was organized around the theme of racism.
Right.
And in that conference, what I didn't say in the article because of the word count and
right.
for editorial purposes, is that in that very same conference, you had Malcolm X, who's a very emblematic figure in the history of the Black movement in America, who made a very strong plea, who pleaded with African heads of state who were present at that conference, asking them to set up a commission of inquiry, an independent commission of inquiry under auspices of the United Nations. Malcolm X addressed the heads of state of the African Union in 1964 and asked them the very same thing, which was discussed on June 19th in Geneva this year. Was that really? It was really that reason, the connection, this full circle moment really prompted me to write that piece.
Yeah, it's amazing how history repeats itself. I was watching on July 4th. This religious leader from the African American community, can't remember his name right now. Farrakhan,
Yes.
Minister Farrakhan. He also spoke and, he said, and he was calling on all African leaders. Number one, he was saying, don't take those vaccines that are being sent to Africa. And, he addressed Bill Gates and was speaking against some of the things Bill Gates is doing. But he particularly, asked the African leaders to mobilize around this issue of racism and help African Americans, basically. But in all of this, someone like Malcolm X was literally a father, and he was a father figure to a lot of people. And I just wanted you to share with me what a father figure means to you.
A father figure means to me, then I'm thinking of my father, and I'm thinking of the father of my children, right?
Yeah.
I think it's this combination of being stern and human at the same time, and vulnerable. It's about a father, especially an African father, having been brought up in Africa. You have this whole notion of the father being the provider, the one who guides, the one who pushes you. I was talking to some of my friends many years ago, some of whom have also lost their father. And we were sharing some interesting memories around the fact that the way we used to look at our fathers, there was also a feeling, a sentiment of discomfort. Those men also represented the unattainable. There was a sort of moral reference to them. Have a discussion with your father and you would never be fully comfortable. As I look at my kids, my daughters now, and I'm like, but you are very comfortable with your father, it wasn't like that at that time. And it's also a man who comes and will teach, will find there was always time for teaching and learning, and simple things, whether it's around schoolwork or whether it's about sending you to do some gardening, telling you to do some chores. There was always some sort of checklist, at least while we were growing up. And I think now it's different for many reasons. Maybe I can talk about it afterwards.
Yeah, it's amazing because a lot of what I hear is that, the only reality, perception is the only reality, in the world that we live in, where, there's quite a big constituency of people that totally believe everything that Donald Trump says, you know.
That's right.
And it's all about perception. We were talking about, you know, how we can change this narrative that black men are lazy, black men cannot, you know, do what they need to be doing in our communities, in our families. You know, a lot of people that say this do not know why some black men can't fulfill their purpose or play their roles effectively. But I just wanted to get your perspective around this. What do you think is the perception of people like me out there?
I cannot pretend to be an expert.
Right.
Let me just preface that. But I agree that there is a crisis in terms of perceptions of masculinity in the world.
Right.
Well, not just in Africa, in the world.
Right.
And masculinity in terms of, I think, black and white men. And I'll get to the black men in a bit. I was listening I think 2 or 3 years ago, I was listening to a small talk given by this Kenyan personality, Caroline Dinda Mutoko.
I know her.
On the boy crisis, right? And I realized it is indeed a contemporary issue, right? And I think you need to, when we talk about the views that women have on men, you have to put it squarely as a contemporary issue, and that with the fact that there's a strong momentum, a redefinition of women's role, who are now more educated. We're more educated than our mothers. Our daughters are going to be more educated than us.
Right.
I think that has confused and left men in general without strong references and confidence in terms of their own role. Because as women's roles shifted and have been amplified, the roles of men remained unchallenged.
Right.
Somehow now feel hollow. But then within that paradigm, you have the black man, the black father, right? And I think black men have to. There are layers of challenges. I think the challenges they faced with are multi-layered. On one hand, you have, for instance, the issue of globalization, right? And by globalization, we also have to understand systemic racism. Right. You have the women's emancipation I've talked about, a general competition over resources. And I think that's where when I was listening to one of your podcasts, the issue of currency becomes very important. Right. Because I think we need to really craft a different role and a different appreciation of African fathers in terms of the morals and the values that we ascribe to them. Is it built from education? Some would say spirituality, but also life experiences and the vulnerabilities that you find in those experiences. And what else could I say? I think there are ways one can change that. And the way one can change that is really to combine the old and the new. And I can explain what I mean by that. The old is, as an African man, because it's there in your country, it's there in my country, in every African country, you have the initiation rites. Right. A man had, in terms of going through the transition from boy to man, had to go through some sort of initiation, right? Right. And I think we need to think about a process that will be similar to that, but adjusted to the parameters where we live. Right. And I could equate that to for instance, the 12-step plan we always hear, people who have addictions and people who have issues and with therapy. And maybe one way of thinking about it is men should get together because they have issues, because they want to learn from each other, They want to learn from their fathers or their uncles, their cousins. Also, very importantly, because they want to transmit wisdom, that experience, that vulnerability, that hurt to the next generation. So that is that's the old, adjusting the old to have a new way of addressing that. And the other, which is more, I think, contemporary, is speaking up on the issue. Having more people doing what you're doing as well. Opening up about, I'm raising children, I'm raising girls, and I'm a man. And this is what my life is about. And these are my expectations, and these are my experiences. Creating more platforms, like building bridges between people from different background. I could go on and on, I think.
You could. You could. I feel like we need more time. We will definitely have a follow-up conversation beyond this. And we are coming to the end of our conversation today, but I just wanted you to share with the listeners of the African Father in America how they can connect with you and on social, and how they can read more of your article.
I'm very bad at that. My father one time said to me, because I have so many work that is unpublished, you have no idea. And my father one time went into my drawers and he said, "But Carine, don't be like me." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I have 3 unfinished books." I want you to be that person who will just find herself being 70 or 60 and having not published. So I have my Twitter. I have a Twitter account.
Right.
There is the Human Rights Watch website where we put all our products, and I would encourage everybody to go on our Africa division page. What else? I think that's about it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for listening to the African Father in America podcast with Simon Javan Okello. Today I was joined by my wonderful sister Carine Kaneza Nantulya, who is the Africa Advocacy Director for Human Rights Watch. Please check out her article, Africa Union Must Keep Momentum to End Structural Racism. It's on the Human Rights Watch website on Africa Division section, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Anyhow, have a wonderful evening, and I'm grateful for your time, and thank you so much for spending this time with me. It means so much.
I am the one who's thanking you. I'm thanking you, Simon. So this was a great opportunity to just have a nice, simple interaction around issues that are very to both of us, and hopefully to those who will listen to this. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
African Father in America. Tujikaze, jikaze. Tujikaze, jikaze. African Father in